the invisible arrogance that destroys us from within, I want you to imagine something with me. Picture walking into a temple not made of stone, but of silence. The air is thick not with incense, but with the weight of unspoken truths. You sit, and someone whispers into your soul, not your ears, you know nothing. Now ask yourself, how would you feel? Offended? Confused? Liberated? This video is not just a story, it's a confrontation. A confrontation with the deepest deception that we all carry, thinking we already know. This ancient warning, passed down through the cracked lips of Socrates, isn't just a philosophical quote you skimmed in a textbook. It's a spiritual alarm bell that, if ignored, leads to the slow, invisible decay of wisdom, growth, and even the soul itself. And I've seen this happen. I've felt it happen in my own life. I've watched people who were once beacons of clarity fall into the abyss of ego, all because they became certain they had already arrived.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
But let me tell you a secret. That abyss, it starts the moment we stop asking questions. I remember once sitting with a monk in the Himalayas. He had spent 40 years in silence. I asked him what he had learned, expecting some grand answer about the universe or God or the soul. But he just looked at me with eyes that felt like mirrors and said, "I learned that I know nothing." And in that moment, I didn't understand. I felt disappointed. I had come so far, and that was it. But now I see it. That was the most powerful thing anyone had ever told me. Because knowing that you don't know is not ignorance. It's the birth of true intelligence. It's surrender. And in that surrender, something strange happens you begin to see. You see how, when someone is absolutely sure of their opinions, their politics, their beliefs, they stop growing. They stop listening. They stop being alive. Because to be alive spiritually is to be in motion, to be a river, not a rock. And the know-it-all? They freeze like stone. They become brittle, easily broken. Socrates said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." But let's go even deeper. Why do know-it-alls fail first? It's because they live in a closed loop. They protect their beliefs like castles, defend their opinions like armies. But castles crumble. And when life throws something bigger at them, suffering, chaos, love, death, they don't know what to do. They fail not because they weren't smart, but because they weren't open. Their minds were full. And a full cup cannot be filled. I want to ask you something, and I want you to really sit with it. When was the last time you truly changed your mind? Not because someone argued better than you, but because you listened deeper than you ever had before. Most people never do. They don't realize that every belief they cling to is a wall between them and the divine. Every "I already know" is a lock on the door of their soul. That is why the spiritual path is not about gathering more knowledge. It's about shedding illusions. It's about unlearning. And the most dangerous illusion? Believing you're already awake. I say this not as a guru, not as a teacher, not even as mere beast who's done crazy, wild, sensational things, but as a brother. A fellow traveler who has fallen into the trap of certainty so many times. I've let my ego dress itself as wisdom. I've had millions of followers and still felt spiritually bankrupt because I thought I knew. And then life humbled me. Maybe you've had a similar moment, a breakup, a failure, a betrayal, something that shattered the version of reality you so carefully built. And in the rubble, you realized you were wrong. You didn't know as much as you thought. But here's the miracle. That's where the real journey began. You see, the ancient warning from Socrates is not just about intellect. It's about spiritual survival. The ones who fall first are the ones who think they're already safe. The ones who fail first are those who think they've already won. The moment you say, "I've arrived," is the moment you start decaying. But the ones who keep saying, "I'm still learning," they are the ones who rise. Let me tell you a story. It's a parable. There once was a master who lived on a mountain. People would climb for days to ask him the secrets of enlightenment. One day, a proud scholar came. He had read every book, mastered every teaching. He said, "I've come to learn from you." The master served him tea. He poured and poured, and the cup overflowed. The scholar shouted, "Stop, it's full." The master said, "Yes, and so is your mind. How can I teach if you've already filled yourself with your own ideas?" That parable is not just for scholars. It's for all of us. Every time we defend our opinion like it's sacred, every time we reject someone's point of view without truly listening, we become that overflowing cup. And we miss the lesson life is trying to pour into us. In the next few minutes, I want to take you deeper. I want you to go inside yourself. Not to gather new facts, but to question everything you think you already know. Because in that questioning, something sacred awakens. The silent death of the ego, how certainty becomes a spiritual prison. You're still here. That means something inside you is stirring. Maybe you've felt it for a long time, that strange discomfort when people speak in absolutes, when someone claims to have all the answers. When you yourself feel the grip of certainty tightening around your mind like a chain, that discomfort is the soul whispering. It's saying, "Break free." Let me ask you something terrifying. What if the person you've been defending your whole life is not really you? What if the truths you've clung to, the labels you've worn, the identity you've armored yourself with, what if all of it was a mask? A performance for the world, and worse for yourself? See, that's what ego does. It builds a castle of concepts around us. I am this. I believe in that. I'm right. They're wrong. And the higher the castle, the more isolated we become. We think we're protecting ourselves, but we're actually cutting ourselves off from life, from growth, from spirit. And here's the cruel irony: the ego doesn't shout. It whispers. It doesn't tell you you know everything. It says you're just really well informed. It says you've just read more than most. It says trust your gut, your truth, your path. But what if your gut is full of yesterday's poison? What if your truth was inherited from fear? What if your path is just the safest road your ego could find to avoid actual transformation? I've seen millions of people online argue over who's spiritual and who's not, who's right and who's wrong, who's awake and who's asleep. But let me tell you something radical. The moment you need to be right, you've already lost. Because spirituality is not a courtroom. It's not about proving others wrong. It's about dying to the self that needs to be right at all. That's what Socrates meant. He wasn't saying, "I'm stupid." He was saying, "I've dismantled the false self so deeply that I no longer cling to ideas." He was free. He was dangerous. He was pure. And that's why they killed him. The world doesn't know what to do with someone who doesn't need to be right, because such a person cannot be controlled. they're not playing the same game. They've left the board entirely. I'll be honest with you, in my journey, even as someone who's built massive platforms, given away fortunes, helped millions, I've had to confront a terrifying realization. I was still addicted to being the one who knows. And the more praise I got, the more dangerous it became. Not because I was evil, but because I was being fed spiritual candy instead of nourishment. I was being rewarded for performance, not presence. And my ego loved it. It's subtle. You can meditate every day, chant mantras, wear white robes, post deep quotes, and still be a prisoner of your own mind. Because the ego doesn't die just because you enter a temple. Sometimes the ego becomes the temple. Let that sink in. How many of us have made our beliefs into our gods? How many of us have made our certainty into our salvation? We don't worship statues anymore. We worship ideologies. We worship labels. We worship the idea that we're already right, and everyone else just needs to catch up. But the soul doesn't care about being right. The soul craves truth, and truth is alive. It moves, it evolves, it breathes. So when we cling to static beliefs, we suffocate the soul. Now you begin to see why know-it-alls fail first. It's not because they're dumb. It's because they've stopped listening. And life, my friend, only speaks to the ones who listen. There's a deep sadness in modern spirituality. You can feel it. A kind of spiritual arrogance that says, I've done the work. I've read the books. I've healed. And yet, there's no softness, no humility, no wonder. But real awakening, it makes you quieter, gentler, more open. You stop needing to prove. You stop needing to show. You start to be. And in that being, something magical happens. You realize that life was never about accumulating answers. It was about deepening the questions. Not, what do I know, but who am I without what I know? Let me tell you a story. There was a young man who journeyed far to meet a famous sage. He had studied all the scriptures, mastered all the techniques. When he arrived, he said, "Master, I've come to complete my enlightenment." The sage laughed, not cruelly but like thunder wrapped in kindness. He said, "My child, enlightenment is not something you complete. It's something that completes you when you finally let go of needing it." And that's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to know, you begin to understand. The moment you drop the sword of intellect, the heart becomes a doorway. You see, the great spiritual traditions didn't begin with answers. They began with silence, with awe, with surrender, with mystery. But today we've traded mystery for certainty. And in doing so, we've lost the magic. So I want to invite you into something sacred, a practice, the practice of not knowing. Tomorrow, when someone asks your opinion, pause. Ask yourself, do I need to respond from ego, or can I admit I'm still learning? When you read something that challenges your beliefs, don't react. Observe. Let it sit like tea leaves in water. Let it steep. Let it change you.